Indonesia is a country of incredible diversity, home to lush jungles, smouldering volcanoes, diverse animal life, fascinating tribal cultures, and unique plants, including the largest flowers on Earth. Many of the islands that make up Indonesia are home to vast ranges of mountains. And on many of these lofty peaks grow carnivorous pitcher plants, or Nepenthes, plants that produce highly evolved leaves to trap and kill insects and other small animals. Indonesia has the greatest diversity of these pitcher plants found anywhere on Earth. My name is Stewart McPherson. For the last 10 years, I've been studying carnivorous plants to write a series of books. I've been fortunate to visit and explore mountains across Southeast Asia in search of many Nepenthes species. But there is one Nepenthes that I always wanted to see, Nepenthes clipeata, a species known from only one mountain and only ever documented and photographed on a handful of occasions. It's unlike all other Nepenthes for having nearly circular leaves and spectacular creamy white pitchers. It's arguably the rarest of all Nepenthes, but unfortunately for all the wrong reasons. This is Mount Kalam, the only mountain in the world that Nepenthes clipeata is known from. Kalam means gloomy in Indonesian, so this is Mount Gloom. It's perhaps named for its sheer vertical cliffs, which so often tower into the clouds. This gigantic plateau's flat summit resonates with mystery. Visible from the lowlands, yet rising over 1,000 meters high, like a lost world. Unsurprisingly, for such a dramatic mountain, local villagers have long held beliefs about the origins of Mount Kalam. One of many stories begins with a local man called Bujang Biji. Bujang Biji's stretch of the river yielded very few fish, and so his catch of fish was always small, far less than his brother, who lived on another river nearby. So Bujang Biji decided to block the river. He quarried a gigantic rock and dragged the mighty boulder towards the river. But mischievous fairies descended from the heavens, laughing at Bujang Biji as they came. Poor old Bujang dropped the giant rock and it became stuck where it fell. No matter how much he tried, Bujang couldn't move the giant boulder anymore. And the huge rock became Mount Kalam. And so Bujang Biji's dream of a blocked river and better fishing prospects was lost forever. Sadly, the real Mount Kalam has suffered greatly in recent years. Man-made fires ravaged the summit, brought on by severe droughts and forest dieback during the severe El Niño years of 1997, 2004 and 2005. And poaching took place on an enormous scale and devastated the population of Nepenthes clipeata, as hundreds of plants were ripped from their habitat and sold into local markets and internationally for many years. It was feared that the species may have slipped into extinction. For over a decade, I wanted to find out for myself how Nepenthes clipeata was faring in the wild. I couldn't bear the thought that one of the most spectacular of all carnivorous plants might be so threatened. Landing in Kalimantan, Indonesian Borneo, a 12-hour drive inland along what seemed like some of the most roughest roads on the planet never seemed to end. But finally, I arrived at the foothills of Mount Kalam. I called into a small town not far from the mountain and visited a local market to buy supplies. Being close to Bujang Biji's river Many of the shops sold dried and salted fish. Maybe Bujang's effort to improve fishing here had worked after all. I also found stalls of exotic and wonderfully eccentric tropical fruit. The famous salak, or snake fruit, the flamboyant dragon fruit, and the smelly durian, prized for its slimy inner segments. With the supplies purchased, the next morning I travelled to the base of Mount Kalam.
Well, we've got really good conditions for climbing Kalam today. It's actually a really exciting mountain. I've wanted to do this mountain for about 15 years or so. The main reason I wanted to climb it so much is just to find out how Nepenthes clipeata is doing in the wild. There was a study done about 20 years ago, a very preliminary study, that suggested that there could be as few as 15 plants left in the wild. The reality is that no one really knows. Very few Nepenthes experts come to this mountain. Very, very few people, in fact, at all. And so it's basically unknown. So I want to get up there and find out. So, let's go.
Initially, the trekking through the flatlands and the lowland forest was quite easy. There was even a concrete path to the base of the mountain. But as the terrain became steeper, the track disappeared, and it gave way to a jumble of rocks and boulders. And finally, the path led through a thin scrub.
Whoa! Look up here! Look up at this view. When the first European explorers came here in the 19th century, they reported that there was a rattan ladder, an old jungle rope ladder that stretched down from the summit right the way up. And the first explorers had to climb up that to get to the top. I've been told that that's no longer the case, that there's metal ladders. But we're just gonna get up there. You can see it gets a bit harder there. It gets onto the bare open slopes. So, not long to go.
The distant view of the summit from the lowlands was certainly impressive, and I began to wonder how anyone climbed up the mountain in the first place to make the original rattan ladder. The German botanist Johannes Hallier was the second European to climb Mount Kalam in 1894, and the first to collect specimens of Nepenthes clipeata, which Benedict Danzer used to name the species in 1928. Hallier recorded that one of the rattan ladders up the vertical sides of the mountain was over 46 meters tall. Soon, I approached the very base of the sheer cliffs.
Ah, here it is. First ladder. I'm not sure the last time that this was used. Let's go check it out. Actually, surprisingly, it's pretty good. It's not bad. I think I'd much rather do this on a ladder than on a rattan rope.
For me at least, climbing up the sheer slopes without a ladder, metal, rattan or otherwise, would have been impossible. I was pleased to find the ladder in quite good shape. It consisted of sections of ladder, bridged by wooden platforms, so that the ladder could hug the topography of the cliffs. The ladders had been bolted directly to the mountainside, apparently more than 30 years ago, and climbing up was surprisingly easy, although many of the wooden platforms had rotted and fallen away, and the replacement sticks that someone had put in their place were also starting to fall apart. And a bit higher up, the ladder's condition became a little bit more rickety.
I don't think Indonesia is very well known around the world for its ladders. This one really keeps moving, and bits keep falling off of it. Look. Hopefully we'll make it to the summit.
An eagle started following me and soaring near, perhaps waiting for me to fall to my death. But at least the view was spectacular, looking across the vast lowlands. To my surprise, as I climbed higher, more and more vegetation was present on the mountainsides.
Just climbing up a bit higher, and look! There's Nepenthes all over here. Sorry, it's a bit of a selfie shot, but not very easy to film up here. There's Nepenthes all over these slopes, rooted directly to the granite of the mountain. I would never have imagined they'd been able to cling on like this.
All of the plants were Nepenthes reinwardtiana, a widespread lowland species common across most of Borneo. They were nice to see, but not what I'd come to climb Mount Kalam to find. Finally, the ladders ended, and I reached the flatter summit of the mountain. It supported considerably more forest than I had expected, although evidence of the huge fires that had ravished the mountaintop during the last 2 decades were plain to see. In the scrubby forest and amidst the thickets of tree ferns, I found pictures of Nepenthes albomarginata, another widespread Nepenthes species found across most of Borneo. I also spotted the brilliant yellow flowers of a spataglottis orchid, and the exquisite bloom of a slipper orchid, Paphiopedilum bullenianum.
Well, this is a known habitat for Nepenthes clipeata, and just 1 year ago, several plants were spotted here, growing just on these rocks. Just looking around this area, we've just found some dead leaves and a Nepenthes clipeata pitcher, and some cut stems that have clearly been macheted. So it looks almost certain that these plants were poached just within the last few weeks or months. Makes me wonder if there are going to be any more plants up on the summit at all. So let's keep climbing and hoping.
Yuping Ko, a Nepenthes expert friend, was accompanying me on this trip. Yuping had climbed Mount Kalam several times during recent years, and he hoped to guide me to several Nepenthes clipeata plants, which he had seen just 1 year earlier.
So Yuping, you've climbed Mount Kalam many times, and you were last here 1 year ago, right?
Yes.
How many Nepenthes clipeata plants did you see then?
It's about 3 plants over there and
Okay.
1 plant over there.
Okay.
And there's a big clump over there, and another big clump is over behind the behind the hills.
But they're gone now.
But all of them is already gone because of the poacher.
Wow, okay. So poaching clearly is still happening here. Plants are still being poached from Mount Kalam.
After several hours searching across the mountain summit, I was starting to think that there really might be no Nepenthes clipeata plants left on the mountain at all. Had I left my visit too late? Had the poachers already taken the very last Nepenthes clipeata plants just a few weeks before my visit? The weather began to close in, and it was time to set up camp for the night.
We finally got to the campsite, and it's a pretty amazing place. It's just the side of Kalam where there's no trees, just some open rocky areas. Here, have a quick look. And it's pretty amazing because just to think, just off the edge, just 10 meters in front of me, there's a huge drop for hundreds of meters. So this is just the only open area that we can camp. So better get the tent up, and fingers crossed I don't roll in my sleep.
I set up my tent just in time as the clouds started to gather and the sky darkened and the rain started to fall.
Well, I just got the tent up in time. It's now absolutely pouring out there. So I was lucky we got here just in time. And lots of little rivers are starting to form on the rock outside, so hopefully it'll be a dry night.
The next morning, I was greeted by a beautiful sunrise. But I had slept little, having spent most of the night worrying about the fate of Nepenthes clipeata and whether there were any plants left in the wild. Despite the impacts that the mountain had suffered, animal and plant life still abounds on the summit. And I intended to continue my search for Nepenthes clipeata in the remotest parts of the mountain summit. Even though the rain had stopped, water seeped out from the vegetation, making the exposed rock extremely slippery. And over hundreds of years, the water had carved channels like water slides into the bare rock surface, leading all the way to the top of the cliffs.
Exploring these mountain slopes is absolutely no joke. If you slip here, you slide on the granite right the way off the mountain.
To make matters worse, a thick mist set in, which made it even harder to determine the easiest path ahead. After several hours of searching, I still had found no Nepenthes clipeata plants at all. Although I did find a striking form of Nepenthes albomarginata, with jet black pitchers and black stems.
This is definitely pretty worrying. There's a very clear sign of a trail up the mountainsides, and it looks almost certain that someone's come here just very recently, within the last few months, and taken some of the last clipeata plants. I'm really starting to worry that we're not going to see any at all.
But just as I was about to give up hope...
Oh look! Here it is! This is a baby Nepenthes clipeata plant. I know it's a clipeata plant because of the shape of the leaves and the fact that the tendril comes not from the tip of the leaf but a bit further in, and the shape of the pitcher. Well, it's the first one we can see, so let's push on and maybe we'll find more.
After spending many further hours searching, I found what I had come to the mountain to see.
And finally, an adult specimen of Nepenthes clipeata. It's one of the most special of all the Nepenthes. It's unlike virtually every other species because it has almost circular leaves, and the tendril of the pitcher attaches halfway below the surface of the leaf, away from the tip of the leaf blade. It's really special, and really there's no other Nepenthes really quite like it. And of course, these beautiful cream-coloured giant pitchers. And isn't it spectacular?
The pitchers were far larger than I'd expected, reaching 30 centimetres or more in height. And they varied in the amount of red coloration that they possessed. Some plants bore traps with pure red peristomes, although all had mottled red coloration on the underside of their lids. I spent the rest of the day and the following morning searching for more Nepenthes clipeata plants and studying those that I found. I noted that the developing foliage was covered with thick orange hairs, and I spotted large black ants on several of the larger Nepenthes clipeata plants. Some of the ants frequently drink the nectar from the peristomes of the pitchers, seemingly with immunity from the plant's traps. Others drummed on the pitchers if the plant was disturbed, perhaps as a warning to the rest of the ant colony. Many Nepenthes are known to have complex mutualistic relationships with ants, and so I wondered if a new undocumented relationship might be found here. And nearby there grew a hybrid Nepenthes that represented a cross between Nepenthes clipeata and reinwardtiana, as its halfway coloration and form revealed. Eventually I left the plants with very mixed feelings. While I was ecstatic to have fulfilled a life ambition to see this beautiful species in the wild, I remain gravely worried about its future.
Well, after 3 days of searching on Mount Kalam, we've so far found 4 adult clumps of Nepenthes clipeata and 3 very small seedlings. The simple truth is, there probably are a lot more plants around the mountain in pockets of habitat on the cliffs and in really remote areas where the poachers simply can't reach. But you've got to ask yourself whether that population is viable. Each plant might only flower once every year, every 2, 3, maybe even every 4 years. And of course you've got to have 2 plants flowering at each time to be cross-pollinated, and plants of different sexes. In my opinion, there's just simply not enough plants left on the mountain to maintain a viable population, and I fear that the species is already functionally extinct.
It's so sad that one of the largest and most unusual of all Nepenthes is so threatened in the wild. This species, which took thousands, possibly millions of years to evolve, might well become the very first Nepenthes to be truly extinct in the wild. There is the possibility that further populations of Nepenthes clipeata survive in vegetated patches on the near vertical cliffs of Mount Kalam, in areas that are simply too steep for poachers to reach. And It's also possible that the species survives on unexplored, geologically similar mountains nearby. Although all of Mount Kalam's close neighbours are far smaller and much lower in altitude, and therefore might not offer the same suitable habitat. As conservationists, it would be irresponsible to assume either possibility to be the case before it may be proven with certainty. And so, as far as is known at the present time, Mount Kalam really is the home of just a handful of the last remnant Nepenthes clipeata plants. And the whole population of this uniquely beautiful Nepenthes faces a very uncertain future. To help prevent the total extinction of Nepenthes clipeata and several other critically endangered Nepenthes species, I've worked to set up an ex situ conservation collection. If Nepenthes clipeata truly does become extinct in the wild, the only long-term hope lies in safeguarding multiple genetically distinct male and female Nepenthes clipeata plants in cultivation. This will keep alive the hope of possible future reintroduction efforts. The project is called Arc of Life. If you have any Nepenthes clipeata plants in cultivation and wish to contribute to the conservation of this species, please consider donating cuttings, plants or seeds to the Arc of Life collection. Visit www.arcoflife.net for details.